Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard is a novel by Kiran Desai published in 1998. It is her first book and won the top prize for the Betty Trask Awards in 1998. 1. It is set in the Indian village of Shahkot, state of Punjab, and follows the exploits of a young man, Sampath Chawla, trying to avoid the responsibilities of adult life. Fed up with his life in Shahkot, Sampath goes to a guava orchard and settles himself in a guava tree, where he uses the gossip he learned while working at the post office to convince people he is clairvoyant and soon becomes a popular, holy man. Kiran Desai based this book on a real-life story in which a man, Kapila Pradhan, too, lived up a tree for 15 years. This was the author's inspiration for the book, and there are similarities between the novel and Pradhan's life in his tree. Kiran Desai, born the 3rd of September 1971, is an Indian author. Her novel The Inheritance of Loss won the 2006 Man Booker Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Fiction Award. 2. In January 2015, The Economic Times listed her as one of 20 most influential global Indian women. 3. During what's supposed to be the monsoon season, the small town of Shahkot, India experiences a prolonged and terrible drought. A strange woman named Kulfi begins to act even stranger than usual, as her pregnancy seems to give her powerful, exotic cravings for food that the drought has made difficult to acquire. Her husband Mr. Chawla and her mother-in-law Amaji try to explain Kulfi's odd behavior to the curious neighbors, but the cravings only intensify. One day, after Kulfi scrawls elaborate crayon drawings of all sorts of food on the walls of her house, the monsoon finally arrives. At that same moment, Kulfi goes into labor and gives birth to her child, and the Red Cross drops long-awaited food and supplies into Shahkot. The neighbors suggest she name her newborn boy Sampath, which means, good fortune. 20 years later, Sampath is a restless and absent-minded young man who works at the Shahkot post office. He still lives in the same house where he was born, with his mother Kulfi, whose odd behavior and cravings have persisted, his demanding father Mr. Chawla, and his kindly grandmother Amaji. He also has a headstrong teenage sister named Pinky, who lives in the same tiny house with them. Sampath has never done well in school, and his career prospects seem to be just as bleak, to the annoyance of Mr. Chawla. Sampath hates his dull job at the post office, only able to entertain himself by secretly reading through the private mail of the citizens of Shahkot. Sampath is fired from his job one night at the wedding of his boss's daughter, where he gets drunk and makes a fool of himself by stripping and dancing in a fountain. Overwhelmed by despair over his depressing circumstances, Sampath has a sudden epiphany when he accidentally causes a guava fruit to burst in his hands. The morning after he's fired, he takes a bus to the outskirts of town, enters an abandoned guava orchard, and climbs the largest guava tree he can find. Resting up in the tree, he finally feels at peace. Bewildered by his behavior, his family tries to bring him down at first, but Kulfi seems to understand why her son wants to live up in a tree. During one attempt to bring him down, Sampath speaks to a crowd gathered around his tree, telling them surprising things he only knows because of his snooping through people's mail in the post office. Believing his knowledge to be miraculous and otherworldly, the crowd spreads the word that Sampath has become some sort of holy man. Realizing that he could make a profit from this situation, Mr. Chawla allows Sampath to remain in the tree and live as a famous wise man. As Sampath's family finds creative ways to take care of him from below, Sampath continues giving sermons and improvised advice to his reverent visitors for the fun of it. One regular visitor is secretly a spy from the atheist society who's determined to expose Sampath as a fraud. But he seems to have no luck with this as Sampath's fame grows along with Mr. Chawla's fortune. Sampath seems happier than ever, and Kulfi is also content, as she has complete freedom to forage for exotic ingredients for the elaborate meals she cooks for Sampath. One day, a group of monkeys appears in Sampath's orchard and takes a liking to him. But before long, they discover alcoholic beverages brought to the orchard by one of Sampath's visitors. The monkeys become drunk and violent, and they're soon hooked on alcohol, seeking it out wherever they can find it. Soon enough, the monkeys begin terrorizing the town of Shahkot in their unruly search for alcohol. The inept government officials of the town come up with various plans to solve this problem, but nothing seems like a good enough idea. Eventually, the monkey crisis becomes a controversy that divides the people of Shahkot, as some believe the creatures deserve respect, while others simply wish to get rid of them. Sampath feels sick and overwhelmed as his visitors argue furiously about the monkeys. He ran away and started living in this tree to escape from his responsibilities, but now he's being forced to face new, more stressful expectations. He realizes that the peace and simplicity of the grove has been ruined, and he longs to escape before he's trapped in this life forever. One morning, as Shakat's government officials and military arrive to forcibly remove the monkeys from the orchard and the Shakat area, they discover that Sampath has somehow transformed into a large guava. The monkeys carry the guava away from the pursuing crowd, into the wilderness, and out of sight. At the same time, the spy from the Atheist Society has climbed a tree directly above Kulfi's large cooking pot, which he suspects contains drugs intended for Sampath. But the branch he's clinging to snaps, and the spy falls into the bubbling cauldron. The crowd wonders about the source of the splashing noise as they slowly approach the cooking pot. An incredible summer heatwave has fallen upon the small Indian town of Shakat. One resident, a recently married young man named Mr. Chala, scans the newspaper for information about the troublesome weather. It seems that people have come up with plenty of outlandish theories to explain the oppressive heat, and plenty more outlandish attempts to solve the problem. The citizens of Shakat struggle in vain to keep cool as they consider wild, superstitious plans to summon the monsoon they so desperately need. But rain still hasn't arrived by the end of summer, and the people begin to lose hope. The heatwave disrupts the ability of Shakat's citizens to live normally in town, bringing an ancient struggle with nature to a modern, urban area. This struggle sets the stage for future conflicts between nature and modernity, both of which are constantly competing for dominance over the other. Themes: Nature versus modernity theme icon. Naturally, the dry, prolonged heatwave has brought a period of drought to Shakat and the surrounding regions. The Red Cross establishes famine relief camps nearby, but their planes always fly over the town of Shakat to deliver supplies to other areas. As the drought reduces the availability of food and strains the town's economy, a pregnant woman named Kulfi, Mr. Chala's wife, seems to grow bigger by the day. The townsfolk can't help but stare at Kulfi as she passes by with her swelling belly, but they quickly look away when they see her dark, intense eyes. But she isn't paying them any attention, as her concentration seems focused on something distant and known only to herself. As the drought continues to interfere with the possibility of a normal modern life in Shakat, Kulfi's introduction adds another layer of strangeness to the town's circumstances. Her quiet focus on something imperceptible to the other townsfolk implies that she might be mentally unwell or perhaps able to perceive things that others cannot. Through the heatwave, nature itself seems to be pushing Kulfi's oddness even further than usual, maybe towards some kind of breakthrough. Themes: Nature versus modernity theme icon. When asked about Kulfi's odd behavior, Amaji, Kulfi's mother-in-law, dismisses the townsfolk's concerns and explains that it's just Kulfi's pregnancy that's making her act so strangely. But Kulfi continues her unusual and single-minded lifestyle, her head swimming with thoughts and fantasies of delicious food of all kinds. She bribes merchants with fine clothes and jewels from her dowry, in exchange for the fruits and vegetables she silently craves. Her husband Mr. Chala is exasperated at her behavior, but Amaji consoles him with the same words she tells the townsfolk: Kulfi is just pregnant, and this odd behavior will pass. After Kulfi's colorful drawings have expanded to take up almost the entirety of the house's walls, a day comes when strong winds blow and swirling clouds finally darken the skies over the town of Shakat. Seeing this from her window, Kulfi shouts that the rain is finally coming. Sure enough, the townsfolk rejoice as a heavy, deafening monsoon descends on Shakat. Amid the sounds of pouring rain and cries of relief and joy, Kulfi roars with the thunder as she goes into labor. 2 hours later, she's given birth to a baby boy with a birthmark on his cheek. Almost immediately after this joyous moment, Kulfi, Mr. Chala, and Amaji hear an earth-shaking noise from outside, and they wonder if the world is ending just as their child has been born. Themes: Outside, where the monsoon is still raging, Mr. Chala and Amaji find the source of the noise. A crate of supplies from the Red Cross has finally dropped from a plane and landed in the jamun tree in the courtyard. As the people of the neighborhood excitedly gather much-needed food and supplies strewn about the damaged tree, they can hardly believe their sudden, almost magical moment of luck and overwhelming relief. Amaji announces the birth to the neighborhood, and the house soon fills with dripping wet people excitedly wishing the baby well. They suggest naming the boy Sampath, meaning good fortune. Kulfi feels a growing sense of peace as she imagines how life might flourish from this moment on. Themes: Summary analysis. 20 years after his auspicious birth, Sampath tosses and turns in the bedroom of the same house he was born in. This is the house's only bedroom, so there's nothing between him and the loud snores of his mother Kulfi, his father Mr. Chala, his grandmother Amaji, and his younger sister Pinky. The noisy fan overhead fails to cool off Sampath as he feels hot, sweaty, and restless in his bed. After trying and failing to find a more comfortable position, he lies down on the hard floor and spreads out, desperate to cool off and fall asleep. He feels that his family is being careless and inconsiderate with their snoring, but he tries not to lose his temper. Eventually, he drags himself out of the hot, stuffy room and makes his way to the roof. This first moment with an adult Sampath immediately echoes the previous chapter. Once again, extreme heat is preventing normal modern life from going smoothly, almost as if nothing has changed since the miracle of Sampath's birth. Sampath's inability to sleep due to his family's snoring also highlights the irony and absurdity of his situation. After being born at such a perfect moment, it would be easy to assume that Sampath would live a charmed, almost perfect life. But this moment confirms that he struggles with the mundane problems of modern life just like anyone else in Shaukat. Themes: absurdity and chaos theme icon, nature versus modernity theme icon. Sampath walks back and forth on the roof of the house, still restless as the heat fails to diminish outdoors. He notes that the street lights aren't working, which is normal for Shaukat except when there's a local election and an ensuing push to bring modern technology to the town. He tries to calm himself as he paces, watching the occasional plane pass overhead and wondering where it's headed. He holds cool, wet leaves to his face and samples various pickled foods stored in jars to mature on the roof. In the middle of his eating, without realizing it at first, he begins to idly sing a quiet song about seeing a princess from a faraway kingdom. The gentle sound of his own singing voice gives him some comfort. Sampath's idle strolling and sitting on the roof is his first character establishing moment. Like his mother, he seems preoccupied with daydreams and fantasies, though the real world affects him a bit more strongly than it does Kulfi. The sights and sounds of Shaukat fill him with a longing melancholy, implying that he's more attuned to nature and carefree adventure than to modern life. His behavior is also childlike despite his age, showing a simple innocence that contrasts with the modern complications around him. Themes: nature versus modernity theme icon. Quotes: as the local night watchman rides his bicycle down the street, Sampath blearily watches dawn come to Shaukat. Still tired from his lack of sleep, he sees morning light illuminate the maze of streets and the mess of rooftops, TV aerials, balconies, power lines, and courtyards that make up the neighborhood. People begin to walk down the streets to work, and Sampath sees his father below, emerging from the house with his yoga mat. Sampath also hears the deep, powerful singing voices of the priests at the nearby temple, a stark contrast to his own quiet singing voice. As he descends back into the house, he wonders how he can clear his cloudy mind, and whether he can ever fill the emptiness in his belly. He briefly encounters Amaji, who can tell he hasn't slept and gently asks him how he'll make it through the day. Themes: summary analysis. Mr. Chala loudly begins his morning routine of yoga stretches, getting cleaned up in the bathroom, and having Amaji and Pinky sort out his laundry. He seems to go out of his way to make plenty of noise as he completes these tasks, as if wanting to announce to the world that he's living responsibly and properly. As the other members of the family rush about him, he reads bits from the newspaper and happily complains about the country's newest corrupt politicians, insisting he saw this coming. Kulfi remains uninterested in this talk as she continues fantasizing about elaborate dishes she could make. Mr. Chala's behavior confirms that he hasn't changed much since Sampath's birth. He's still devoted to maintaining an appearance of order and propriety, even to the point of absurdity. Similarly, Kulfi remains as distant as she was before, still focusing on food despite no longer having cravings due to pregnancy. All in all, Mr. Chala's household is still chaotic despite his attempts to adhere to social norms and raise an ordinary family. Themes: absurdity and chaos theme icon, traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Pinky is also bored with Mr. Chala's reading of the newspaper, asking him if there's anything in the news about the cinema monkey. When Mr. Chala admits ignorance on this topic, Pinky explains that a troublemaking monkey has been harassing women outside the local cinema lately, pulling and ripping their clothes until they drop their snacks. Mr. Chala snorts derisively at this, while Amaji suggests that Pinky could take Sampath with her to the cinema to protect her. Pinky insists that Sampath would be no help, and Amaji admits that he's probably not threatening enough to scare a monkey away. They all turn their gaze to Sampath, who's slouched tiredly at the table, morosely watching a fly in front of him. The existence of the cinema monkey, is both ridiculous and fits with the emphasis on nature's conflict with modernity. Through this troublesome monkey, the wildness of nature is a constant presence in the otherwise sensible, modern town of Shawkat. The animal's behavior also highlights the absurdity of the situation. The antics of the cinema monkey make Mr. Chawla's attempts at normalcy seem even more futile and ridiculous. Meanwhile, Sampath's dullness suggests that he isn't thriving in a normal setting. Themes: absurdity and chaos theme icon, nature versus modernity theme icon. Annoyed by his son's passive attitude, Mr. Chawla swats the fly with a newspaper and berates Sampath, asking him where his common sense has gone. When asked, Sampath mutters that his work is going all right, but this isn't enough for Mr. Chawla, who points out that if things were going well, Sampath would have received a raise in pay by now. Sampath had failed so many of his classes that it was difficult for him to find a job for the longest time. When asked about the job Sampath finally found, Mr. Chawla always explains that Sampath is in government service. This vague description paints a picture of a comfortable and well-paid position, but in reality, Sampath has a lowly position at the back desk of the Shawkat post office. Themes: still irritated with Sampath, Mr. Chawla continues his tirade about the value of work and all the things Sampath should be doing to further his career. Amaji continually interrupts his speech with questions about what Sampath would like for breakfast, which annoys Mr. Chawla even further. He insists that she's interrupting important matters, but Amaji reminds him that getting a good meal is just as important for Sampath as anything else. Their argument continues. Mr. Chawla complains that Sampath has only been moving down society's ladder since the day he was born, and will soon reach the very bottom. But Amaji cheekily points out that the world is round, and that Sampath is simply taking the longer route down, so that he might pop up on top of the other side of the world. Nonetheless, Mr. Chawla continues his rant, which Sampath endures in silence, imagining the pleasant sleep he couldn't find last night. Kulfi watches all this and feels sorry for her son. His bicycle with Pinky, Sampath unsteadily makes his way through the crowded streets to his workplace, the post office in the center of Shawkat. His erratic journey through the noisy crowds eventually makes Pinky feel ill, so she makes him stop so that she can take the bus to work instead. As she climbs aboard, a man winks at her, a sure way to risk her wrath. She pokes him hard with her sharp hairpin, and the full bus drives away noisily, leaving Sampath to cough in the dust and fumes it leaves behind. After reaching the post office by way of a shortcut, he crawls under a raised patch of the wire fence surrounding the building. The bustling crowds of Shawkat make it a lively and chaotic place, matching the light and satirical tone of the novel. While chaos and wildness are usually considered hallmarks of the natural world, the crowds and noise of life in Shawkat show that even modern urban life can be messy and unpredictable. Pinky's attack on the winking man on the bus is an early defining moment for her character, as she displays fierce independence and even violent tendencies. Themes: absurdity and chaos theme icon, nature versus modernity theme icon. As Sampath enters the dark and grubby post office, his eyes adjust to the change in light as he hears two of his co-workers express relief that it's only Sampath and not their boss walking in on them. These co-workers are Mr. Gupta and Miss Yatsna, who sit across from each other, playfully discussing how the cinema monkey had ripped Miss Yatsna's petticoat and forced her to visit an amateurish tailor to have it fixed. The subject of an upcoming wedding also works its way into their conversation. At the beginning of the wedding season, the daughter of the head of the post office is to be married. The head of the post office himself has made it clear that many of the wedding arrangements are the responsibility of his employees. Miss Yatsna mentioning the cinema monkey is a humorous confirmation that the mischievous creature isn't just an occasional concern, but a constant nuisance in the town. Even so many years after the terrible drought, nature still encroaches into Shawkat, making ordinary modern life chaotic at times. Meanwhile, the upcoming wedding represents yet another form of stressful responsibility weighing Sampath down. The stifling expectations of others make Sampath feel more and more trapped by the day. Themes: absurdity and chaos theme icon, nature versus modernity theme icon, traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Just then, the three postal workers snap to attention as the head of the post office, Mr. DPS, enters the room and immediately begins listing wedding preparations that still need seeing to. Still feeling drowsy and out of sorts, Sampath remembers how his father had told him to act at work this morning, and imitates Mr. Chawla's tone as he suddenly says, "Yes, sir. I will see to it right now, sir." Everyone, including Sampath himself, is surprised by this strange change in demeanor, and Mr. DPS warns Sampath that he's being watched, and not to misbehave. As Sampath begins the day's work, he struggles to focus his attention on the accounts and ledgers relating to the wedding plans and expenses. He tries to sort through these documents for a while before eventually giving up and tending to the day's mail instead. As usual, he curiously opens the many envelopes to snoop through the interesting pieces of mail as he sorts through them. He sees postcards and reads the names of exotic locations, imagining more interesting places far from Shawkat. He also reads plenty of gossip, news, and personal details concerning the people of the town. When Mr. DPS discovers that Sampath hasn't completed his assigned work for the day, he gives Sampath a stern warning on his way home. Sampath wonders how he's supposed to focus on things he doesn't find interesting, especially when he's gone without proper sleep for so long. Summary analysis. Several months later, at the start of the wedding season, the night of the wedding at Mr. DPS's estate finally arrives. Sampath is given a simple task: to fill the guests' drinks and clean the used glasses. This job becomes boring quickly, especially after Sampath has a few drinks of his own. In a drunken, curious stupor, he wanders away from the festivities and explores his boss's house, looking through drawers and cabinets for anything interesting. Eventually, he finds a room where some of the family's young women had quickly dressed each other and left in a hurry, leaving a bounty of fine and fabulous clothes strewn all about the floor. Sampath's behavior at the wedding reflects his restless habits at the post office. Once again, he can't help but ignore the expectations his boss places on him, choosing to wander aimlessly in search of something interesting instead. Sampath seems unable to tolerate any task that feels boring to him, no matter how many people expect him to perform that task. Themes. Traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Without even thinking, Sampath takes a whiff of a fragrant bottle of rosé water and lets his fancies carry him away, alone in this room. He tries on the various fine clothes lying all over the room, adorning himself with rich silks, colorful feathers, and fancy jewelry. As he lights a candle so he can see himself more clearly in the mirror, his mind wanders to other moments in his life involving lit candles in dark rooms. He remembers trying to study for exams in his school days, but getting carried away in his mysterious fantasies and distractions. Just as he did in those memories, he preens and makes faces in the mirror as he admires his colorful costume, feeling strangely happy and carefree. Through this carefree messing around, Sampath begins to let go of the oppressive sense of responsibility that's been keeping him down for so long. By idly dressing up in elaborate costumes and visiting old memories, he reverts to a childlike state of freedom. The absurdity of this situation is exactly what makes Sampath feel so free. While others expect him to adhere to the traditions and responsibilities of their society, Sampath embraces his ridiculous impulses simply for the fun of it, achieving a temporary kind of escape. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. Traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Quotes. Eventually, getting carried away even further by the exciting sights, sounds, and smells of the wedding, Sampath emerges from the house and back into the party area, still wearing the fine, colorful ensemble he found. Still drunk and carefree, he climbs into a fountain in full view of Mr. DPS and many of the wedding guests, singing and dancing foolishly. At one point, a moment of mad inspiration overtakes him and he begins to strip off pieces of his fine clothes, then his own ordinary clothes underneath, until he's wildly dancing naked in the fountain without a care in the world. When Sampath returns home that night, newly unemployed and still wet from the fountain, his family asks incredulously what happened. As he sheepishly explains himself, thinking of how he had hated his job anyway, his family begins loudly talking over each other with reprimands and stern suggestions for what he should do now. Even Mr. Gupta and Miss Yatsna visit the house to check on him and discuss the matter. Sampath feels overwhelmed and miserable, as if everyone's harsh words are a net that's keeping him trapped. He reflects on how he hates his life, feeling as though the entire town is a stifling labyrinth from which he can never escape. Themes. Later that evening, as Sampath sits sullenly on the roof, he sees Kulfi's head sticking out of a window, as if she's in need of some fresh air as well. Sampath's head swims as he listens to all the noises of the neighbors, his mother muttering about cooking ingredients, and his own thoughts about failing to understand mathematics back in his mission school days. All the noises combined with sickening thoughts of his former job seem to nearly drive him mad, and everything threatens to overwhelm him. Themes. When Kulfi comes up to the roof and offers Sampath a guava, his anger wells up inside him as he grabs the cool, bumpy fruit. He shakes the guava and stares at it intently as he miserably asks it what to do. To his surprise, the surface of the fruit expands and the guava explodes, showering the rooftop and hitting some of the neighbors with seeds. Strangely, Sampath feels his heart swelling, as if something has suddenly changed within him. Kulfi, meanwhile, says she'll complain to the fruit seller and asks if he'd like an egg instead. Sampath, oddly smiling, replies that he doesn't want an egg, he wants his freedom. Summary analysis. Later that day, Sampath's family inquires with the local police to investigate his sudden disappearance. The neighbors gossip about this, and after one full day of Sampath having seemingly vanished off the face of the earth, the watchman of the nearby university research forest spreads the news that someone had climbed a tree in the old orchard outside of town, and hasn't descended. Correctly assuming that a person this crazy must be Sampath, the family takes a bus to the outskirts of town to look for him in the orchard. When, after a while of searching, they find Sampath in his guava tree, he wonders what he might say to defend himself, but ends up saying nothing as his family urges him to come down. Despite Sampath's serious motivations for wanting to leave modern society behind, the humor and absurdity of the situation shines through in this sequence of events. Sampath's family knowing immediately that Sampath is the man in the tree is both comedic and telling. It reinforces the association between Sampath and nature, while highlighting how ridiculous and unlikely the situation is. But the presence of guava fruit is still significant. Sampath has finally found a simple, happy place for himself in nature and is unlikely to return to modern life. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. Nature versus modernity theme icon. While Mr. Chala, Amaji, and Pinky tell Sampath to get down from the tree and stop this foolishness, Kulfi quietly recalls her own past, and her own feelings of being trapped and unable to escape. She feels she understands why her son is up in a tree, and knows that this is where he must belong. She tells Mr. Chala to let him be, but Mr. Chala refuses to allow his son's behavior to continue, insisting that only monkeys climb trees, and that he's the only person in the family with any sense. Meanwhile, Sampath holds tight to the branches of the tree, still silently refusing to descend. Mr. Chala comparing his son to a monkey strengthens Sampath's association with the wildness of nature even further. Up in his tree, it's almost as if he's shedding his humanity and starting to become something different. This mention of monkeys may also be foreshadowing events to come. Meanwhile, Kulfi's instinctive understanding of Sampath's decision highlights how both of them feel similarly trapped by the constraints of modern life. Kulfi was in much the same situation in the first chapter, so she can't blame her son for finding a means of escape. Themes. Nature versus modernity theme icon. Believing that something must be wrong with Sampath, the family enlists the help of the local drive Banerjee, who agrees to climb the tree to give Sampath a checkup when Sampath refuses to come down. After examining the young man, Drive Banerjee can only shrug and admit that Sampath is physically fine but mentally crazy, and nothing can be done about that. Next, the family tries getting help from other doctors, who prescribe homeopathic remedies that seem to have no effect on Sampath's behavior. Finally, they ask a holy man near the local deer park for help. They tell him that their son has gone insane and describe his behavior, but the holy man rules out insanity as an explanation, instead suggesting that they arrange a marriage for Sampath to solve this problem. Themes. The family eventually finds a prospective bride for Sampath. The young woman arrives on a bus along with a group of singing pilgrims heading home from a visit to the nearby Krishna temple. These passengers happily agree to take the young lady directly to her husband to be up in the tree. As the group approaches, offering the girl in front of them like a gift, Sampath looks down at her and remembers fantasizing about the girl on the bottle of hair oil in his bathroom. He feels hot and nervous as the crowd urges the girl to climb the tree and meet Sampath. Uncomfortable in the tree and unsure of what to do when she reaches Sampath, the girl lightly touches him, causing him to jump in fright and her to tumble back down to the ground in surprise. Themes. Quotes. As the pilgrims fan the poor girl with a leafy branch and remark on how inauspicious these circumstances are for marriage, Mr. Chala throws up his hands in exasperation. He wonders aloud what he's going to do with Sampath, remembering how he himself had been Sampath's age when he was married. Kulfi's family had wanted to marry her off as quickly as possible, as they feared her odd behavior would only continue, and that they would have to take care of her for the rest of her life. When they learned that Amaji was looking for a wife for her son, they offered her a valuable dowry along with Kulfi. Mr. Chala had protested, not wishing to be wed to a woman who seemed so abnormal. But secretly, he had been attracted to her and happy to fulfill his role as the responsible and level-headed man of the family. Themes. Quotes. Nonetheless, Mr. Chala continues ranting about how he can possibly be expected to properly raise a boy who insists on living in a tree. The pilgrims agree with the sentiment and look up to Sampath to see how his father's frustration is affecting him. Still uncomfortable around people, Sampath wants to shoo everyone away, but holds back this urge. He reflects on his post office days and recognizes some familiar faces in the crowd below. He calls out to one man, asking if the man's jewelry is still buried under the tulsi plant. Shocked, the man asks how Sampath could know about that secret information. Sampath only knows because of the private letters he'd idly read during his post office days. But rather than admitting this, he continues asking members of the amazed crowd about matters they believe to be private. Themes. Astounded by all the intimate knowledge Sampath somehow possesses, the crowd returns to Shaukat to spread the news of what they've heard. Surely Sampath is something greater than a normal man, to know all the things that he knows. Later that week, Mr. Chala reads a local news story to the rest of the family. The story describes a mere post office clerk who had climbed a tree, and who has since demonstrated a spiritual gift and incredible wisdom. Through this short story, Sampath is introduced to the world as something akin to a holy man. The family adjusts to their strange new life. Pinky can't help but feel overlooked as all the attention shifts to Sampath. She's dissatisfied living out in the orchard permanently, so she resolves to make the most of her regular visits to town to purchase supplies. She puts a great amount of effort into assembling fantastic outfits for visiting the bazaar, and she likewise develops the suspicion that men in town are so attracted to her that they're following her. Worried that Pinky is going a bit crazy away from Shaukat and wishing to teach her good sense, Mr. Chala insists that she only wear plain, drab clothes to the bazaar from now on. Despite Pinky's protests, she's ultimately forced to adhere to her father's demands. Pinky's strong desire to visit Shaukat shows the conflict between nature and modernity in a new light. While Sampath is happy in the natural world, Pinky longs for the excitement and romance that modern, urban life can bring. Mr. Chala's insistence that she wear plain clothes is a sign that he's still devoted to maintaining an appearance of normalcy in his family. Even in the midst of a bizarre new life centered around Sampath and his tree, Mr. Chala continues to adhere to traditional ideas and customs as much as possible. Themes. Nature versus modernity theme icon. Traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. One day, Mr. Chala sends Pinky to the bazaar with Amaji to help Amaji purchase a pair of dentures. Still sulking and upset about having to visit the bazaar in such plain clothes, Pinky only cheers up and Amaji takes her to see an exciting romance film at the local cinema after buying the dentures. But Pinky's good mood shatters shortly after exiting the theater, as she spots the dreaded cinema monkey, infamous for harassing moviegoers for their snacks, approaching her and Amaji as they wait in line at the Hungry Hop ice cream van. She yells at Amaji to run, but the monkey pursues Pinky instead, even though she isn't carrying any food for him to steal. Just when Pinky finally gets back into the rhythm of modern life, a chaotic force of nature invades modernity in the form of the cinema monkey. Despite Pinky's efforts, it seems there's no escaping from the wildness of nature or the absurdity of her new life. Nonetheless, Pinky's feelings about the romance film set the stage for other events to come on this chaotic day. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. Nature versus modernity theme icon. Hearing Pinky's shrieks of distress as she's chased down the street by the cinema monkey, the boy working at the Hungry Hop ice cream van leaps into action to help. For no reason apparent to anyone but herself, Amaji takes a bite of her ice cream cone as she runs, accidentally dislodging her new dentures into the frozen treat. Startled by this, she drops the cone and the dentures, and the monkey steals both of them as he darts towards a tree. The Hungry Hop boy scares the creature away by waving sticks. He balances the dentures on the end of one of the sticks and kindly offers them to Amaji. Themes. Pinky, still trying to recover from this ordeal, stares at the Hungry Hop boy and feels her heart drop as he playfully teases her with a good-natured joke. Despite visiting the Hungry Hop ice cream van so many times before, it only occurs to her in this moment how attractive she finds this boy. But of course he had to see her today, when she looks so plain and embarrassed and not at all her usual impressive self. She begins to cry bitterly as soon as she returns to the orchard, cursing the apparent fact that she and the hungry hop boy might have had a future together if the circumstances had been a bit different. Month later, Mr. Chala has added all sorts of convenient amenities to the family's life in the shed in the orchard. They now have their own private electrical lines and water pipes, and Mr. Chala continues to further his plans to make a fortune off of Sampath. He collects fees from bus drivers delivering the orchard's visitors, and he contacts banks and business owners to inquire about advertising in the orchard, where their businesses would be granted an air of holiness by their mere association with Sampath. He also sets up a stall where devotees can purchase offerings to leave for Sampath, only for the family to collect these offerings and sell them again the next day. All the while, Mr. Chala is careful not to make his growing wealth too noticeable. The orchard must maintain an appearance of spiritual humility, no matter its profits. Through his new schemes and advancements, Mr. Chala continues to exploit the spiritual beliefs of the visitors to Sampath's tree. Day by day, Mr. Chala brings more elements of modernity to the otherwise natural orchard, implying that more modern developments may be yet to come. His commitment to keeping his wealth hidden highlights how deceptive and exploitative his operation has become. Mr. Chala aims to achieve all the benefits of having a holy man in a tree, but without any of the drawbacks. Though Mr. Chala's exploitation is still subtle and unobtrusive, it's a worrying sign that Sampath might not have really escaped modernity after all. Themes: Nature versus modernity theme icon, exploitation of spirituality theme icon. Quotes. One of Sampath's most regular visitors is secretly a spy from the Atheist Society and a fervent member of the branch to uncover fraudulent holy men. Wishing to expose Sampath as a fraud, this spy asks a barrage of questions, all of which are met with the usual vague bits of wisdom from Sampath. As the spy carefully writes these sayings down in his notebook, he reflects bitterly on his lonely life in Shaukat and the troubled poverty of his youth. He's determined to expose Sampath so that he, the spy, might rise from his difficult circumstances and become a well-respected intellectual. His relentless series of questions continues as Sampath becomes dizzy, wondering why this man is being such a nuisance. The atheist spy is an almost antagonistic presence in Sampath's new life, aiming to expose him and undermine the holy man narrative. Ironically, the spy correctly senses that the situation is exploitative, but he focuses all of his attention in the wrong place. He assumes that Sampath must be the mastermind of the fraudulent operation, rather than Mr. Chala, who's actually pulling the strings. He's right about the exploitation of spirituality happening in the orchard, but he doesn't realize that he's tricking himself as well. Themes: Exploitation of spirituality theme icon. Sampath grows quiet at the spy's questioning, and the spy happily takes more notes behind a tree, muttering to himself that Sampath is avoiding questions by pretending otherworldliness. Meanwhile, the devotees discuss how Sampath's mind lapsed into a higher state, and how this explains his sudden quietness. Amaji, still proud of her grandson, eagerly explains how Sampath has always been spiritual, as his behavior was odd from an early age. Surely he was never able to focus on the mundane things of the world such as his schooling because his mind was drawn instead to the infinite mysteries of life. Themes. Quotes. The conversation about Sampath's apparent holiness continues, as Miss Yatsna, now a regular visitor to the orchard, chimes in. She mentions how unfocused Sampath always was back at the post office, often unable to carry out even the simplest tasks on his own. Amaji explains how they had once found a beautiful girl for him to marry, but he had showed no interest, once again proving his otherworldliness. The devotees nod in agreement, considering how inappropriate marriage would be for such a holy man. All of them appreciate the natural beauty of the orchard as they talk in this way, and Miss Yatsna begins to sing. Sampath watches and admires her as the spy wonders to himself how Sampath could have fooled everyone so completely. Remembering strange smells from Kulfi's cooking pot, the spy wonders if perhaps Sampath's food could be drugged. Summary analysis. One day in the orchard, Pinky shouts as she points out the cinema monkey approaching from a distance. Sampath looks out and delightedly realizes that a whole band of silver-gray monkeys seem to be moving into the orchard. As everyone watches them cluster in the trees, Amaji darkly warns that these creatures are sure to bring nothing but trouble. Over time, the monkeys visit more and more often, slowly becoming more comfortable with Sampath's presence in their domain and realizing that all the food in the orchard seems centered around him. Sampath quickly befriends the apes, who seem to enjoy his company greatly. His guests marvel at how he's apparently tamed the formerly troublesome creatures, and even the spy is secretly unnerved by this almost magical turn of events. In the midst of an already absurd situation, the arrival of the monkeys adds yet another layer of chaos. While the creatures seem to be relatively benign, Amaji's warning might foreshadow problems they'll cause in the future. The monkeys almost seem to be nature's way of fighting back against Mr. Chala's attempts to bring elements of modernity to the orchard. Just as modernity arrives to complicate the simple beauty of the orchard, nature encroaches and makes the space a bit wilder again. Themes: absurdity and chaos theme icon, nature versus modernity theme icon. Quotes. Meanwhile, Pinky tends to burst into tears whenever she lays eyes on the monkeys, as they remind her of the hungry hop boy she pines for. Ever since that harrowing day at the cinema, she's grown more compassionate towards Sampath. She looks at him up in the trees and doesn't blame him for wanting to escape from such a painful world below. She feels guilty as she remembers how she'd tease him when he came home from school and went to the roof to be alone. As she sits beneath his tree, her thoughts still become troubled and painful whenever she thinks of the hungry hop boy. One night she asks Sampath what to do about it, and he replies with one of his usual sayings. He speaks of a metaphorical firecracker that's already been lit and is going to explode, one way or another. In this brief moment of reflection, Pinky realizes that she was once part of the oppressive system that kept her brother feeling trapped. Through her teasing, she harshly imposed a set of unwanted expectations on Sampath, at a time when he already felt like he didn't belong in the world. Her sympathy for Sampath demonstrates how she's grown as a person since then, now that society has seemingly turned its back on her as well. However, Pinky and Sampath still fail to connect on a deeper level in this moment. Sampath speaks to his sister in the same vaguely mystical way that he speaks to all of his other visitors, implying that he still sees her as an outsider and not as a family member. Themes: traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Quotes. Desperate for something to change, Pinky takes Sampath's vague advice to heart, figuring that she should take matters into her own hands and explode on her own terms. While everyone's distracted with Sampath's bathing routine, she gets dressed in her finest clothes and makeup and makes her way to the bus stop. The spy had been sneaking around the outside of the orchard all morning, trying to think of a way to get in outside of visiting hours. Upon seeing Pinky, he decides to pass the time back in town instead, and to follow Pinky to see if she's doing anything suspicious. Pinky notices the spy following her in the bushes, confirming her suspicions about men following her, and she jabs him with her hairpin on their way onto the bus. Themes: since the cinema monkey incident, the well-meaning but slow-hungry hop boy hasn't thought much about Pinky or the possibility of romance. He simply assumes that a girl will be found for him when the time comes, so he's surprised to see Pinky barreling towards him with an intense expression, rather than passively waiting for him to say something. He lightly jokes again and smiles at her, filling Pinky with equal amounts of excitement and fury. For a moment, she thinks she might give him a kiss, but the mad, sudden aggression in her heart overcomes her instead, and she bites his ear. The boy cries out in pain as a piece of his ear falls to the ground and people rush to find out what happened. Trembling, glaring, and apparently without regret, Pinky is taken to the police station, spitting out hungry Hop's blood. After tending to the wounds of both the spy and the hungry hop boy, Drive. Banerjee gives an explanation about human bites to the local newspaper representative outside his clinic. Meanwhile, an incredulous policeman talks sternly to Pinky at the police station, asking her why she bit the hungry hop boy all of a sudden. Pinky merely continues glaring, undaunted by threats of being sent to a mental asylum. Just then, another policeman enters the room and informs him that Pinky is the brother of Sampath, the well-respected holy man. Apologizing to Pinky and not wishing to offend Sampath's family, the officers drive Pinky back to the orchard. Pinky remains stormily quiet all the while, still not regretting she bit the hungry hop boy. Themes: after the policemen visit Sampath and receive his blessing, one of the officers asks if he could have a photo with Sampath for the police station. This gives Mr. Chala the idea to hire a photographer from Shawkat to take high-quality pictures and expand Sampath's fame even further, making more money in the process. The timid photographer is so relieved to be out of Sampath's tree after taking the photos that he asks for no payment in return, simply taking his leave. Mr. Chala's plan works, as the photos of Sampath sell very well at the orchard, and the picture is eventually printed in the Times of India as well. After this, Sampath receives much more mail than usual, as people all over the country ask for his wisdom and guidance. Themes. Meanwhile, at a meeting of the Atheist Society in a nearby town, the spy delivers an impassioned speech to his fellow society members. He rails against Sampath and vows to expose him as a fraud, even as the major publications of India take Sampath's alleged divinity for granted. The spy's tirade is so long and furious that his audience begins to think he's going too far. To the spy's horror, he finds himself quoting Sampath's vague aphorisms without realizing it at first. He finds he can't sleep that night as these troubled thoughts swirl about his mind. He feels an emptiness and uncertainty in his life that makes him even more desperate to expose Sampath at last. Before long, there comes an afternoon when the monkeys of the orchard find several bottles of rum in the bag of one of Sampath's visitors. Almost immediately, the apes begin to exhibit drunken and energetic behavior, disturbing the usually peaceful atmosphere of the orchard. To make matters worse, they seem to become addicted to the thrill of seeking out and drinking alcohol. They begin discovering and stealing more and more beverages from the visitors, eventually starting to attack every vehicle that comes to the orchard, in search of more drinks. Disturbed by these violent events, Sampath's devotees reflect on how the monkeys used to be a mere nuisance back in town, but now they're becoming a real menace. As the incidents with the drunken monkeys occur more and more often, Mr. Chawla surveys the nice, profitable orchard he's put together, complete with advertisements, stalls, signs, and all. He feels that these monkeys represent a threat to what he's built and the money he's been discreetly storing in a bank account. He tells Sampath that perhaps it's time for him to live in a proper concrete hermitage, where the environment could be more controlled and the monkeys would no longer be a problem. Irritated by Sampath's incredulous look, Mr. Chawla goes on to tell his son that he can't live in a tree forever, and that the monsoon is coming soon anyway. He tells Sampath that he can't keep saying nonsense either, and advises him to learn real religion and philosophy. With the added pressure of the unruly monkeys in the orchard, the subtle tension in the orchard finally bubbles to the surface. Mr. Chawla's suggestion to put Sampath in a hermitage reflects Mr. Chawla's endless need for expansion, growth, and civilization as he exploits the orchard's visitors. He claims to care about how a proper, holy man should live, but his only true concern is the orchard's profits. Nature is fighting back against his exploitative, modernized vision of the orchard, but he isn't giving up so easily. This conversation makes Sampath realize modernity is quickly catching up with him. Even up in a tree, his father has strict expectations for him that threaten to tie him down and erode his new freedom. Themes. Nature versus modernity theme icon traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon exploitation of spirituality theme icon quotes. Sampath utterly refuses to ever leave his tree, despite Mr. Chawla's insistence that the monkeys will ruin the orchard's reputation. Sampath sits in furious silence as he reflects on how Handi's father are completely different. As Kulfi brings him dinner, he feels tenderness for her as he fondly remembers getting sick and missing school for a whole glorious week after eating something she cooked for him once. She understands why he never wishes to leave the tree, just as she always understands his ways. That night, Sampath warns the monkeys to behave themselves, or else they'll all be in serious trouble. The contrast between Sampath's parents is clearer than ever in this moment. In Sampath's view, Mr. Chawla represents everything Sampath tried to flee from: responsibility, expectations, and the exhausting complications of modernity. Meanwhile, Kulfi remains a source of comfort as she continues to understand and support his decision to leave society behind. Through this lens, Kulfi and Mr. Chawla practically symbolize the forces of nature and modernity, respectively. Sampath appreciates his mother's simple, unconditional love for himself and nature, especially as Mr. Chawla's modern complications threaten to swallow him up. Themes. Nature versus modernity theme icon traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Soon enough, the monkeys disregard Sampath's advice and invade a liquor stall in the Shaukat Bazaar. After drinking all the alcohol they can get their paws on, they return to the orchard, rowdier and more violent than ever. They ignore Sampath's attempts to calm them down as they cause absolute havoc at the orchard. Sampath can't help but remember a traumatic experience he'd once had with a frightening drunk man, but he privately thinks to himself that the monkeys are different. He still admires them, even as he watches them destroy property and terrorize the orchard's guests, who've taken to fighting the monkeys back with makeshift slingshots. Themes. After laying waste to the rest of the orchard, the monkeys violently rustle the branches of Sampath's tree. They shake him about as he watches the world blur around him, unable to process how quickly all this chaos has come to the orchard. He nearly falls from the tree, clinging to the branches for dear life and still refusing to come down, even for his own safety. When at last the monkeys turn their attention elsewhere and depart, crashing wildly through the nearby university research forest, Mr. Chala decides that he must take action immediately. The next day, he sets off for Shawkat, determined to let the town's government officials know that it's their responsibility to do something about these apes and restore peace and order to the area. Themes. Summary analysis. Early that same morning, the newspaper man delivers the story of the dangerous monkeys to the doorsteps of Shawkat. One of his stops is the home of the town's chief medical officer, CMO, who shouts at the newspaper man when his paper lands in his morning tea tray. The CMO is always afraid that his own health is in decline, and he believes that his stress about the matter is making it worse, creating a vicious cycle. Dismayed, he considers how this monkey news will be difficult to deal with and likely bad for his stress levels. He decides to go on an herbal diet immediately and drink plenty of onion juice. The CMO is the novel's introduction to the bumbling, inept government officials of Shawkat. Far from the paragon of order and responsibility Mr. Chala expects him to be, the CMO seems to be a nervous wreck who focuses more on his own concerns than those of the town. The absurd irony of a public health official constantly worrying about his own ailing health makes him perfectly unqualified for his position. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. Just then, Mr. Chala arrives at the CMO's house, immediately demanding that the CMO do something about the monkey problem. Rattled and feeling unfairly pressured during his delicate morning routine, the CMO attempts to defuse the situation. He mentions that monkeys are associated with the god Rama and are thus respected by many in town, including himself. But this is only his attempt to placate Mr. Chala and make him go away, so the CM also agrees to call the head of biology at the nearby university. Mr. Chala asks if this head of biology is the same man who devised a failed plan to capture monkeys with sleeping pills some time ago. At this point, Mr. Chala's fierce determination to bring order to Sampat's Grove meets the CMO's timid hesitation to take action on the monkey problem. His mention of the monkey's association with Rama is another example of the traditions and customs of Shawkat making the situation more complicated than it might be otherwise. Based on Mr. Chala's question, it seems as if the head of biology will prove just as ridiculous and ineffectual as the CMO. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. Traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. Meanwhile, the man they're discussing, Verma, reads the morning paper himself and discusses it with his wife. He excitedly mentions that this might be his chance to test out his new hypothesis. If they kill the monkey's leader and display its body in public, the other monkeys will lose morale and retreat into the forest, never to return. Meanwhile, his wife has always been unimpressed by his theories. She remembers all his past failed experiments and makes fun of him, saying that the monkeys will probably attack him if he tries his new approach. Sighing at his wife's mean sense of humor and apparent lack of scientific knowledge, Verma decides to call the CMO for more information about the monkeys. Themes. At that moment, the town's brigadier receives a call at the local army outpost. It turns out to be Verma, who's called the brigadier instead of the CMO on accident due to faulty phone lines. After this happens several more times, the frustrated brigadier enters the bathroom and sits on the toilet by the window as he begins to engage in his favorite pastime, birdwatching. He keeps a notebook of all the birds he sees, and he's determined to spot the elusive green pigeon, as he hears its song but never sees it. He also glances down into the compound where the army men are doing their morning exercises. He wonders what the use of their discipline is during chaotic times like this. From the window, he shouts at his men to pick up their pace. Themes. Get tea. During his bath later that morning, the brigadier thinks of the monkeys and suddenly realizes with horror that the army base has a mess hall with a fully stocked bar. Knowing that this bar must be protected from the monkeys, he rushes out of the bath to call the police superintendent. The assistant on the other end informs him that the superintendent is unavailable, as he's on an investigation when in reality, he's getting his shoes shined. Undeterred, the brigadier tries to call the CMO instead, but the faulty phone lines put him in touch with several other people instead. Themes. Growing more frustrated, the brigadier sets out to visit the CMO in person. But the CMO has already left home to visit Verma with Mr. Chala, while Verma himself has left home to walk through the gardens to the university. As a result, none of the three authorities meet each other to discuss the monkey problem this morning. Meanwhile, Sampath gently berates the monkeys for their episode of bad behavior, feeling like a disappointed parent. But despite his scolding, he still feels that he can forgive the monkeys entirely, as he loves them too much to stay angry with them. Summary analysis. The hungry hop boy sits in his family's house, still reeling from the day Pinky bit his ear. The rest of his large family, mostly women, takes pity on him, figuring it might be a while before he gathers the courage to go outside again. Images of Pinky still swirl about his mind, and he fears the day he might see her again. Meanwhile, Sampath sits in his tree and offers Pinky another aphorism, this one concerning worms that are forced out of the ground by rain. But as he tries to comfort his sister, he's plagued by doubts and worries of his own. He worries about what might happen to him and the monkeys, hungrily wishing he could absorb the beautiful landscape around him into his own being. The hungry hop boy's reaction to Pinky's attack is understandable, as he's unaccustomed to the kind of wild chaos she suddenly brought into his life. On the other hand, his constant thoughts about Pinky might signal more than just fear. Meanwhile, Sampath's old longing to escape from his circumstances begins to creep into his mind again. Now that modernity has seemingly followed him into the wilderness, it's no longer enough for him to simply escape into nature. He begins to feel as though he must somehow become one with nature if he's ever to find true freedom. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. Nature versus modernity theme icon. Quotes. Pinky sits under Sampath's tree and writes a note to the hungry hop boy, still glad to have bitten him but hoping that the event won't mark the end of their relationship. She once again takes Sampath's advice to heart, hoping to barrage the boy with reminders of herself until he has no choice but to face her again. Her note explains that she's sorry for biting his ear, as the sight of him made her overwhelmed with emotion, which manifested itself in the wrong way. After heading into town and approaching the boy's house, she sees the women of the household sitting in front of the entrance in a leisurely way. Knowing that they'd all turn on her the moment they recognized her, Pinky slips into the back alley behind the house. As ridiculous as her relationship with the hungry hop boy has been so far, Pinky is nonetheless determined to see it through. The boy's family aims to protect him from further violence, but Pinky seems to know that there's more to the situation than that. She once again feels an overwhelming emotion stirring inside her, and nothing's going to stop her from acting on it. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon. When Pinky sees the hungry hop boy sitting by the open bathroom window above her, she's once again overwhelmed with emotion. She affixes her note to a small rock and throws it upwards, where it hits the boy on his jaw, causing him to stagger back. Shaking and reeling, he reads the note attached to the rock and wonders if there could really be love between himself and Pinky. He sits in the bathroom pondering this for so long that the women of the family eventually begin pounding on the door, wondering what's taking him so long. After finally breaking into the room, they figure he must have injured himself and their sympathy for him begins to wane. They tell him to pull himself together as Pinky lingers under the window, pining for him. Themes. From this moment on, Pinky and the hungry hop boy begin a strange sort of regular correspondence. Pinky continues to visit hungry hop during his bath hour, and the two of them exchange items of affection through the window. In hungry hop's case, these items are just common objects he finds in the bathroom, but Pinky appreciates the gestures all the same. When the boy's family finds out about this arrangement, they resolve to put an end to it and begin to guard the house to prevent Pinky from visiting again. They also inform Mr. Chala and ask him to stop his daughter from bothering their son. Despite these obstacles, Pinky and the hungry hop boy still find a way to communicate by bribing the milkman to deliver letters to each other. Summary analysis. In the midst of troubled times, Sampath struggles to think of the right words as he tries to write a poem. He imitates an inspiring poem he'd learned in school, during the singular moment of his education that had truly, positively affected him. But try as he might, he can't think of anything that sounds profound enough. He continues to worry about what will happen to him, and how much longer his new way of life can last. Meanwhile, the spy continues worrying about his own state of mind as he spies on Kulfi. He's concerned that he's being brainwashed by Sampath's aphorisms, which he can't seem to get out of his head. Kulfi grows tired of the usual ingredients around her. She begins to fantasize about more and more elaborate and exotic dishes, eventually hatching the exciting idea of cooking a monkey. Sampath's inability to think of anything profound is a sure sign that his new way of life is truly beginning to fall apart. Intentionally or not, he's built his entire holy man persona on his wise and meaningful sayings. If he's at a loss for words, he must feel as though he's out of ideas and out of hope. It seems as if it's inevitable that modernity will continue to invade nature and crush his bright spirit. As usual, Kulfi mirrors his attitude, though she takes a more positive approach. She also feels restless and dissatisfied with her current situation, but the concept of the new dish gives her hope that she can lift Sampath's spirits again. Themes. Summary analysis. The monkeys continue their reign of terror with renewed energy. They shrug off the slingshot attacks of Sampath's devotees and begin to attack people in the streets of Shawkat in their relentless search for alcohol. After they bite 2 people, the town erupts in outrage. As the CMO, afraid of getting rabies from the monkeys himself, issues a statement urging the people not to panic, the Hanuman temple speaks up in defense of the monkeys, which they consider to be sacred creatures. This splits the town into 2 factions: those who wish to respect the monkeys, and those who want them gone. The public officials of Shawkat fear the civil unrest that this controversial conflict will surely cause. Though the monkeys' shenanigans in Shawkat are absurd and unbelievable, the problems they cause for the town are very real and pressing. As nature and modernity clash very literally and violently all around town, its people turn on each other over matters of religious tradition. Those who treat the monkeys as sacred creatures believe in the importance of their cultural traditions, while those opposed to the monkeys can only see the chaos of nature trespassing in civilization. In both cases, the citizens of Shawkat respond to chaos by quickly and angrily attempting to restore order, much like Mr. Chala. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon nature versus modernity theme icon traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. The conflict over the monkeys manifests itself in front of Sampath's tree, as both sides viciously argue in the once serene orchard. Sampath continues giving his sermons, but he feels that his heart is no longer in it, and he knows that the arguing visitors aren't really listening to his words anymore. Miss Yatsna is firmly on the side of the monkeys, as she believes that Sampath, often called the Monkey Baba, would no longer be the Monkey Baba without the monkeys in his tree. She bursts into tears when Sampath's family holds firm to their belief that the monkeys should be removed for Sampath's safety. Sampath struggles to suppress his own anger and sadness as these fierce arguments rattle him. The monkey conflict seems to have made the entire town tense and divided. Summary analysis. Arriving on a train from New Delhi, the long-awaited new district collector of Shawkat comes to town at last. This DC, a gentle and shy man, finds himself surprised and immediately overwhelmed by the talk of monkeys upon his arrival. No one had told him about the monkey problem on his way into town, but his secretary, who turns out to be Mr. Gupta from the post office, rapidly catches him up to speed. The DC struggles to keep up as Mr. Gupta explains the situation, trying to appear troubled by the monkey situation but secretly happy to be at the center of attention again. The fact that the DC arrived in Shawkat in the middle of the monkey crisis implies that he might be better equipped to deal with the problem than the local authorities. On the other hand, his obliviousness to the situation on arrival signals how likely it is that he'll be just as incompetent as the rest. Mr. Gupta's inappropriate eagerness in the midst of this bedlam only adds to the comedy and absurdity of the mise. For the sake of appearances and good publicity, the new DC and Mr. Gupta briefly visit Sampath to receive his blessing. The DC feels a pang of sympathy for Sampath as Sampath remains silent and turns away in the face of another arguing crowd. This only makes the DC more nervous about the situation than before, but Mr. Gupta tries to reassure him. Later on, the DC and Mr. Gupta meet with the Brigadier to discuss the Brigadier's plan for getting rid of the monkeys. Having heard about the plan to scare the creatures away with guns, an angry mob gathers outside the meeting, shouting cries of outrage. The Brigadier angrily demands that the crowd come up with a solution of their own, and he mocks the idea of trying to negotiate peacefully with the monkeys. The DC's sympathy towards Sampath shows that he, the DC, is at least a bit more conscientious about the situation than his peers. But this doesn't affect things much, as he typically follows the guidance of the more cynical Mr. Gupta in any case. Their politically motivated visit to Sampath's orchard is another example of everyone in Shawkat exploiting Sampath's apparently spiritual nature for their own purposes. Meanwhile, the angry mob back in town seems to demonstrate that the chaos present throughout the novel is inescapable, whether in the Grove or Shawkat. Themes. Absurdity and chaos theme icon, exploitation of spirituality theme icon. Ultimately, the DC decides that the Brigadier's plan is not ideal, as it could result in human casualties. Later that day, they meet with the CMO to discuss his plan. With the advice of Mr. Gupta, the DC dismisses the CMO's prohibition plan as well, because of the outrage and complications that banning alcohol would cause. Finally, the group visits Verma to discuss his plan. Feeling irritated and bitter that his own plan hadn't been approved, the CMO immediately rejects Verma's plan out of spite. Mr. Gupta and the DC agree, and the officials head home sheepishly, knowing they've failed to decide on a workable solution to the monkey problem. For a second time, the government officials of Shaukat completely fail to agree with each other on a solution to the monkey crisis despite devoting an entire day to trying to make a difference. The CMO's petty response to Verma's plan highlights just how ridiculously the town's officials are behaving. The plan was unlikely to succeed in any case, but dismissing it immediately for personal reasons is nonetheless absurd. The officials' feeble attempts to solve Shaukat's problems continue to be a source of comic relief. Themes: absurdity and chaos. Theme icon. Quotes. At his home that evening, the DC silently worries about the monkey problem, and his dinner isn't helping to lift his spirits. The cook, whom Mr. Gupta had already upset before, prepared a grubby dish of burnt, tasteless cutlets for the DC, seemingly as a statement of dislike. Just then, Mr. Chawla suddenly steps into the room, interrupting the DC's gloomy thoughts. Mr. Chawla introduces himself as Sampath's father, and proposes a plan of his own. On the last day of April, the town's military could band together and capture the monkeys all at once, delivering them to a far-off forest from which the apes can never return. Themes. Lit Charts logo. Upgrade to unlock the analysis and theme tracking for all of Hullabaloo in the Guava orchard. Or sign in. Nervously sensing that the orchard is slipping away from him, Mr. Chawla is bent on solving the monkey problem and setting his plan in motion. He successfully convinces the DC to approve the plan, as it seems to be a solution that will more or less satisfy everyone without offending anyone too much. For Sampath's safety, it's decided that he should temporarily descend from the tree while the monkeys are being captured. But Sampath refuses to come down, feeling that once he's descended, somehow there will be no climbing back up. He maintains that he will neither descend nor live without his monkeys. He glumly reflects on how messy and noisy his once perfect orchard has become, and he silently resolves to escape somehow. The town begins preparing to follow Mr. Chawla's plan, though it isn't always clear how exactly they should be preparing. The brigadier pushes his men to their limits as they march around town, while the police force assembles the nets for capturing the monkeys. Meanwhile, the air in the orchard is tense as Sampath continues to feel that everything is closing in around him. He's so sick with worry that he hardly eats anymore, despite Kulfi's attempts to keep cooking for him. Nonetheless, she holds on to her secret plan to cook a monkey for him soon, believing that such an exotic dish will surely revive his spirits. Sampath stares into the mountains and once again dreams of escaping his circumstances. The monkeys chatter and groom each other in the tree, seemingly ignorant of what's to come. Meanwhile, the hungry hop boy's family has kept him locked up as they plan an arranged marriage that will make any further romance with Pinky impossible. Concerned about their plans, the boy sends a secret letter to Pinky by way of the milkman, letting her know that time is of the essence. She agrees, and the two of them resolve to meet on the last day of April. Everyone will be distracted by the monkey catching scheme, so it'll be the perfect time for both of them to sneak out and elope in the ice cream van. Both of them feel thrilled at the thought of finally running away from their unreasonable families together. Through their secret correspondence and plans to elope, Pinky and the hungry hop boy continue to defy cultural norms and the expectations of their families. The circumstances of their relationship are as strange as can be, but this doesn't deter them in the least. For a brief moment, it seems that their plan will go off without a hitch, and that they can live happily together at last. But it's also very possible that it won't be that simple, as it hasn't been thus far. Themes. Traditions, customs, and expectations. Theme icon. As she busily packs her belongings and prepares to elope, Pinky begins to feel sorry for Sampath once more. She thinks it's unfair that his happiness seems to be coming to an end, just as her own better life is finally beginning. One night, she excitedly offers to let him come along with her and the hungry hop boy, and to leave this place forever. But Sampath only feels more ill when he imagines the smell and the noise of life on the endless road. Feeling suddenly angry with everyone, he refuses Pinky's offer and lashes out at her, urging her to leave him alone. Pinky silently wonders what happened to her brother's nerve. In this moment, Pinky attempts to bond with Sampath over their shared desire for freedom one last time. But once again, the siblings have two different ideas of what freedom means to them. Neither has much interest in adhering to society's expectations, but unlike Pinky, Sampath can only feel free in nature. The thought of life on the road disgusts him because it would still be a modern life, no matter if he was always on the move. To Sampath, freedom is more than just travel. His anger in this moment reveals his desperation as he realizes there's no clear escape from his situation. Pinky might be free at last, but Sampath is still trapped by modernity invading his orchard. Themes: Nature versus modernity theme icon, traditions, customs, and expectations theme icon. On the day before the last day of April, the Hungry Hop Boy's family introduces him to his bride-to-be. The boy spends most of the day sulking and throwing tantrums, completely refusing to even look at the girl they've chosen for him. But eventually, curiosity gets the best of him, and he enters the room to see her. Immediately, he stops in his tracks and finds her beautiful and perfect, to the great satisfaction of his family. For the rest of the night, his head spins with a painful new dilemma: will he elope with Pinky the following morning as promised, or will he take the easy road and marry this beautiful young woman who was chosen especially for him? Themes: Lit Charts logo. Upgrade to unlock the analysis and theme tracking for all of Hullabaloo in the Guava orchard. Or sign in. Tossing and turning all night, the Hungry Hop Boy turns the options over in his mind. He's attracted to both Pinky and his bride-to-be, and both of them have a hold on his heart. Pinky is thrilling and unique, but the young woman his family has chosen is especially beautiful, and his family has also promised a luxurious wedding and dowry were he to accept her. Unable to decide, he gets in the van at 4 in the morning, driving around the dark streets as he struggles with his indecision. At one point, he holds up the large group of monkey catchers in a narrow street. They order him to get out of their way as they journey to the orchard to enact Mr. Chala's plan. Nervously, still unable to make his decision, the Hungry Hop Boy continues his restless driving through the streets of Shawkat. Summary analysis. Earlier that morning, a series of mishaps delays the monkey catching group significantly. The DC and Mr. Gupta are forced to clear the DC's driveway as the enraged cook unpacks all of his belongings from the house, intending to move out at once after his cooking was insulted. The brigadier holds up the army men as he finally spots the green pigeon he's been obsessively seeking for so long. After failing to catch the bird with the heavy monkey nets, he furiously orders the military procession forward. But their trip to the orchard is interrupted yet again by more suitcases and belongings strewn about in front of the CMO's house. The CMO hastily explains that he's taking a vacation due to health problems. Here, at the novel's climax, the banal absurdity of modern life is out in full force as every possible thing seems to go wrong. If anything, Shawkat's government officials are even less competent and organized than they were before this crucial morning. It's also interesting that the elusive green pigeon helps to stall the military's progress. During a mission attempting to tame nature and bring it under society's control, the town's military is ironically stopped in its tracks by one of nature's smallest and simplest creatures. Themes: Absurdity and chaos theme icon, nature versus modernity theme icon. When the CMO has finally moved his belongings out of the road, one of the CMO's servants warns the already furious brigadier that he shouldn't continue down this road anyway. This is because, further down the road, Verma's wife has decided to leave him, and she currently has her packages and belongings out in the road in front of Verma's house. Consumed by fury, the brigadier orders his men to back up and take another, much longer route out of Shawkat. It's during this time that the company halts behind the meandering Hungry Hop van, which delays them even further. Exhaust from the van puffs into the army men's faces as the Hungry Hop Boy endlessly deliberates between Pinky and his bride-to-be. Summary analysis. Meanwhile, in the quiet and peaceful orchard, Kulfi mutters in her sleep as she dreams of all the ingredients that should go into the monkey dish she's planning to make. Suddenly, she awakens as she realizes that she needs cicada orchids to make the meal perfect, as surely it'll be a disappointing disaster without this crucial ingredient. As she hurries up the hillside to search for this flower, the spy watches the scene from the shadows, knowing that this is finally his chance to investigate the cooking pot he's been suspicious of for so long. At the same time, Pinky waits in town for the Hungry Hop Boy, feeling angry and unhappy for reasons she can't explain. Even in the tranquil orchard, the absurdity of the novel's climax continues. As Kulfi continues her mad pursuit of cooking a monkey to perfection, the spy investigates a cooking pot that isn't nearly as important as he assumes it to be. Pinky's unexplained frustration foreshadows that the hungry hop boy is likely to disappoint her, leading to yet another chaotic and messy failure. Amid all these disasters, the authorities' plan to restore order to Shawkat seems more laughable than ever. Themes: absurdity and chaos. Theme icon. Sampath lies in his tree, sitting perfectly still and quiet for a very long time. As the night and dark early morning wear on, he remains in his stillness and feels an odd sense of peace wash over him. It seems that he can sense every slight noise and sensation in the natural world around him, almost becoming one with his surroundings. Darkness envelops him, and he picks one of the ripe guavas from the branches. He admires its perfect shape, its bumpy texture, and the cool feeling of the fruit against his skin. As he holds it close, the night continues, and Sampath lies still in the perfect peace and quiet. On the most tense and uncomfortable night of his life, Sampath finds an unexpected moment of inner peace. The symbol of the guava fruit returns to remind him of the wild notion that brought him here to the tree in the first place. As he reflects on the idea of perfect simplicity and freedom one last time, he seems to blend into nature. It's possible that he can only escape modernity through a kind of transcendence. In this moment, he seems to find it. Themes: nature versus modernity. Theme icon. Quotes. Back in Shawkat, the hungry hop boy nearly goes mad as his indecision persists. He drives wildly through the narrow streets, still unable to make up his mind about Pinky and the bride his family has chosen. Looking around, Pinky spots the hungry hop van and feels a moment of relief, followed by confusion as she watches the van pull into another street, away from the agreed-upon meeting place. Time and again, she watches the van pass by, growing angrier and more incredulous each time. The van also blocks the monkey catcher's path again at regular intervals, driving the brigadier to near madness. Fuming with rage, he swears he'll shoot the boy driving that van that keeps getting in their way. Nervously, Mr. Gupta tries to calm him down, but the brigadier's anger grows as the delays continue. Themes: lit charts logo. Upgrade to unlock the analysis and theme tracking for all of Hullabaloo in the Guava orchard. Or sign in. Mr. Chala shouts up into the tree to tell Sampath that the monkey catchers will be arriving soon. Brimming with nervous excitement, the spy takes advantage of this one last quiet moment to approach Kulfi's unattended cooking pot. He climbs up into a nearby tree, precariously positioning himself on a branch directly above the cauldron. From this vantage point, he'll be able to see everything that happens with the cooking. He can even take samples of the brew with his glass vials and string. Finally, it seems, he can discover the secret of Sampath's inexplicable success. Themes: get the entire Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard lit chart as a printable PDF. Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard PDF. At last, just as dawn comes, the brigade of monkey catchers finally arrives in the orchard. The monkeys in Sampath's tree scatter in panic as Mr. Chala loudly announces the brigade's arrival. The army men immediately leap into action to follow the plan, but they quickly hit another snag. The brigadier had caught the hungry hop boy in the monkey nets to prevent him, the boy, from causing any more delays with his van in the narrow streets. As the men struggle to extract the hungry hop boy from the nets, Pinky looks at him with scorn. The boy gives her a sorry expression, but she appears to give up on him. He looks pathetic, and he's disappointed her at just the wrong moment. Themes: Mr. Chala shouts up into the tree, urging Sampath to come down for his safety, as planned. But he receives no reply, and he soon realizes in horror that Sampath is nowhere to be found up in the branches. He shouts and looks wildly around for his son, and everyone gathered in the orchard frantically helps with the search. They can't find Sampath anywhere, but they soon spot a much stranger sight. Up in the tree is a large object on the cot that they hadn't noticed before. It's an enormous guava, much bigger than any of the others. The monkeys surround it, and on its side is a large brown bruise, like a familiar birthmark. Just as Amaji recognizes the strange guava to be Sampath himself, the cinema monkey grabs it and carries it away, followed by the other monkeys. Themes: the entire crowd gives chase as the monkeys retreat with their enormous guava up the hillside and into the forest. In the midst of the chase, Pinky sets her romantic sights on the brigadier, who suddenly seems dashing and is surely a much more ambitious man to aim for than the hungry hop boy. The monkeys race deeper into the forest and higher up into the mountains, crashing through the trees as they ascend. The apes briefly rush past Kulfi as she gathers flowers. Shielding her eyes from the rising sun, she watches as the monkeys travel up to the summit of the highest mountain, where the trees briefly shake as if waving goodbye. Then the monkeys and their guava are gone at last. Themes. In the ensuing silence and stillness, the people hear a strange series of sounds, a loud crack, a howl, and a sudden splashing noise. Kulfi wonders what the noise was, and everyone asks each other what it could possibly be. Turning their attention from the mountain summit to the cooking pot, they notice a broken branch above it. In the pot, they smell delicious herbs, seasonings, and all the exotic ingredients Kulfi has added to her brew, along with something else. Carefully, everyone approaches Kulfi's simmering cooking pot.